trophy has a red and gold reflection.
These guys are hungry for more. They want to build a dynasty here.
Believe in each other. Fly around. Let's find a way to win.
And he's going to be hit. Chris Jones got him in a bear hug. Pacheco blasts into the end zone at the 10-5. Leap to the end zone. Touchdown.
The Chiefs held on to win a close one last week for their third victory in a row. And now back on the road for a second straight week, Kansas City is in the land of 10,000 lakes for a showdown against Kirk Cousins and the Minnesota Vikings. We are 2 hours from kickoff. You've waited all week for this very moment. It's finally here. It is time for football in Chiefs Kingdom. Let's do this. My name is Matt McMullen, joined by Voice of the Chiefs, Mitch Holthus. This is Field Pass, presented by StorageMart. And Mitch, it wasn't always the prettiest game last week, but the guys found a way in the end.
Two of those wins that you talked about are in the same category to me. Road wins, not pretty, not fantasy wins to win your fantasy league, but reality wins. They had to show toughness, grit in all three phases to pull that off when Patrick did not throw for 400 yards and have 5 touchdowns. Significant, Matt. The Chiefs were able to win it in that fashion.
Yeah, and they finished it offensively, and that was really encouraging to me because there were 7 minutes left on the clock, and the Chiefs were only up 3 when Zach Wilson fumbled the football. And you wonder, well, if the Chiefs go 3 and out and punt, the Jets have a chance to maybe tie the game or win the game, right? Well, Patrick Mahomes was like, no, we're ending this right here and right now. He leads a 15-play drive, and New York never saw the ball again.
The defense set that up. Okay, there were 3 possessions, and I know we'll talk about them in a minute, but 3 possessions where the Jets could have taken the lead and had awesome field position and got 0 points. But then the offense took it from there. Again, we all want to win our fantasy league or if you wager on these games, but forget all that. This was a matter of the Chiefs just taking the game over, basically, and running the ball. Whether it was the offensive line gets a lot of credit here, right?
Yeah.
And the fact that we underrate the leading rusher by a quarterback in Chiefs history now in Patrick Mahomes. His ability to run when needed and actually get some explosive runs are huge and have been ever since Pat became the #1 starter.
Well, let's talk about that running game last week because it was really impressive. The Chiefs rushed for 204 yards as a team last week. That was their most since week 6 of the 2020 season. That's when Clyde Edwards-Helaire ran wild against the Buffalo Bills a few years ago. Isaiah Pacheco led the way last week. He recorded career highs in rushing yards, rushes of double-digit yardage, and total yards from scrimmage with 158 back in New Jersey. You know, he was excited, and he had a huge game. And how about Patrick Mahomes? You just mentioned it. It's 3rd and 23. He scrambles for a 25-yard gain, moves the chains. When the Chiefs can run the football like this, whether it be designed runs with Isaiah or Jarek or Clyde or Patrick Mahomes just scrambling, they are so much more dangerous.
Well, and people think of running the ball as 3 yards in a cloud of dust. They're getting explosive runs. That's a 48-yard touchdown by Isaiah Pacheco. 48 yards. That's a huge chunk. And then the 3rd and 23 that you mentioned for 25 by Patrick, and he has that ability, as I just mentioned, to get an explosive run. So does McKinnon. We've seen Clyde do it. If you can, and the Chiefs have faced so much zone, Matt, it becomes a necessity. It's not a luxury necessarily. Now, the chunk runs are a luxury, but you must run the ball if you're seeing that much zone because they're basically daring you, hey, run the ball and see if you can get an explosive play.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about the 3rd and 23 because it was just incredible. It has to be so frustrating for the defense that on the biggest play of the game, they cover up everything so well on the back end. The receivers aren't open. It doesn't matter. Patrick Mahomes still finds a way. And really, I think last week was a testament to him and his greatness because, sure, it wasn't his best game in terms of the stats, but it didn't matter in the end. He found a way for the Chiefs to win that game. That's why he's the best quarterback in the game.
What was amazing, it was the first time in either his college career or pro career that the opposing quarterback had more attempts, more completions, and more touchdown passes. Crazy. But the fact that he won the game tells you how far Patrick Mahomes has come. When you look at the fact that, you know, in 84 games, he's 67-17. His road record is 35-8. Not all of those are 350-yard passing games and 5 touchdowns and no picks. The fact that he overcame 2 kind of nasty interceptions that he took on himself, he talked about it later in the week, but still was able to win that game and do it in a different way, tells you just how far Patrick Mahomes has come since he became the 10th pick for the Chiefs in the 2017 draft.
Yeah, it's awesome. Now let's talk a little bit about the defense Patrick's facing here today in Minnesota. I won't shut up about this because I think it's so fascinating. These guys blitz a lot, all right? They have the highest blitz rate in the NFL this season at 57% of the time. Now looking at their game logs this year, they blitzed Baker Mayfield 21 times in week 1, Jalen Hurts 16 times in week 2, Justin Herbert 42 times in week 3. I had to look that up and check it like 3 times to make sure that was correct. It is. They blitzed him 42 times in week 3, and they blitzed Bryce Young 18 times last week. It's what these guys do, and what makes it even more interesting is that Patrick Mahomes is not getting blitzed this season. He has the lowest blitz rate in the NFL this year at just 15%. Defenses don't want to blitz him because it opens guys up in this offense. Well, what's going to happen here today? That's the question. These Vikings love to blitz. No one ever blitzes Patrick Mahomes. Something has to give.
I think it's the lead paragraph of this game. It's the lead thesis because they have blitzed 57.6% of the time. That's the most in the next-gen era, right, since 2016. That's 8 seasons.
Wow.
But Patrick Mahomes, throughout his career, when he's blitzed more than 33% of the time, way less than the Vikings and Brian Flores have blitzed, he's 13-0. He's got 39 touchdowns and only 10 interceptions. Now, the Chiefs are last in the league right now in blitz quarterback rating. You're thinking, what? But it's because there's such a small sample size.
Yeah.
So, to me, the fascinating strategic part of this game, Matt, is will Brian Flores blitz? Is he going to blitz at this alarming rate, and what will Pat do with it?
Well, it's what Brian Flores does. He's, of course, the defensive coordinator here for the Vikings. He was the Miami Dolphins head coach, though, back in 2020 when we played against them, and he blitzed Patrick early and often. He blitzed him on 60% of his dropbacks in that game. So I do fully expect them to blitz Patrick here in this one. What's also interesting is as much as they're blitzing, the Vikings have the 5th fewest pressures in the NFL this season. And what happens if you blitz and don't get home? You give up big plays. They've given up 10 passing plays of at least 25 yards this season. That's 4th most in the NFL. If the blitz can't get home here today, Patrick has to make these guys pay.
And they play a lot of zone blitz. There's 2 different blitzes here, right? There's man blitzes and there's zone blitzes. And Flores is a zone blitz guy. Going back to that 2020 game in Miami, Patrick threw for 393 yards. He also had 3 interceptions in that game, but he had 2 touchdown passes. It's a matter of recognition, starting not only with Pat, but the offensive line. Creed Humphrey's got a big lot on his plate today. He has got to call out the right line calls so that they can try to pick up these zone blitzes, because you're going to see every blitz known to man. Most of them are zone. But who's it really on? The wide receivers. They have got to understand, where's the blitz coming from? Is it a zone blitz? Is it a man blitz? Where do I go to be in the right spot for Patrick Mahomes? This will be strategically the biggest challenge these young receivers have had yet this year.
Sure. And this Vikings defense is talented. We should talk about that. They have Danielle Hunter on this team at edge rusher. He has 5 sacks this season, 5th most in the NFL. And their pass rush is heating up a bit. Last week against Carolina, they racked up 5 sacks as a team.
And again, it was confusion with the Carolina protection, and not just the offensive line, right? The RBs. But Carolina, when you go back and look at the video of that game, they were just off. Danielle Hunter is one of the more underrated players in the league, and for sure in the NFC. He leads the NFC with 5 sacks. So he can wreck the party. But another guy here, and he might have saved their season, is Harrison Smith, who's good in coverage. He's a 12-year veteran, a 6-time Pro Bowler. But his sack and strip of Bryce Young that led to the scoop and score might have changed or saved Minnesota's season.
And he had 3 sacks all by himself just last week. How is your safety getting all these sacks? Because you're blitzing a lot, so I'm sure they'll blitz him quite a bit here today. Let's talk a little bit about the Chiefs' defense, because they were outstanding once again last week, particularly late. On the Jets' final 3 possessions, they go punt, fumble. And how about Brian Cook's effort on Breece Hall's 43-yard run to midfield? It seemed maybe inconsequential at the time because you're upset the Chiefs gave up a big play. If you go back and look at that game, that moment, the Jets never moved further into Chiefs territory the rest of the game. That was truly one of the hidden game-winning plays for the Chiefs last week.
Don't forget, you and I need to remind each other so that the 2 of us can remind all of you. There's 2 plays not to forget. Noah Gray's run after catch of 12 yards that led to a 4th and 2 conversion against Jacksonville, and Brian Cook's tackle. I was talking to BC this week about it. It is, in essence, Matt, was a pick 6. That was 7 points for the Jets.
Yep.
So think, hey, a pick six might win my fantasy league if I've got defensive scoring. But this play will not show up in a fantasy league. It's a touchdown-saving tackle. And the fact that he made that play then led to the sequence that you're alluding to that I talked about a couple minutes ago. 3 possessions. The Jets had the ball right at midfield or near it or into Chiefs territory after the 43-yard run and got 0 points out of any of those 3 possessions. That is unheard of in this day and age in the National Football League. And so this defense, which faces a challenge today, continues to do major things to win games for the Chiefs.
And we talked about it all summer. We really believe this could be the best defense of the Patrick Mahomes era. Well, we're seeing it so far. They're not really getting the credit they deserve nationally, I don't think. They are the only team in the NFL this season to hold the opposition under 19 offensive points in every game this year. Not the 49ers, not the Cowboys, not the Bills. It's the Kansas City Chiefs who have been the most consistently dominant defense in the NFL this season. You're right, though. This might be their toughest task here today in Minnesota. Really interesting season offensively for the Vikings because Kirk Cousins leads the NFL in completions and passing touchdowns with 11. Justin Jefferson is maybe the best receiver in the NFL. He leads the league in receiving yards, but giveaways, that has been the issue. They have 11 turnovers this season, most in the NFL.
Man, talk about a mercurial team. You're just trying to figure these guys out. They shouldn't be 1-3. They could have beaten the Eagles. Now, let's just go
through. And the Chargers, too.
And the Chargers, too. So Jefferson is very Mahomesian in his numbers. He has played in this league 3 years and 4 games. He's like 800 yards ahead of the second closest guy in NFL history in that regard. Nobody in this league has ever had 2,000 yards receiving. Megatron got the closest, 1,964 back in 2012. Justin Jefferson is on pace, Matt, to have 2,300 yards. The dude is just a machine, but you're right. They have too many giveaways. Kirk Cousins, they have 19 completions of 20 yards or more. That's the best in the NFL, but they lead the league with 7 giveaways. Cousins has 7 giveaways in 4 games. He's thrown 4 picks, okay, so has Pat, but he's lost 3 fumbles. That's 7 giveaways in 4 games. That's the reason these guys are 1-3, but also dangerous.
Yeah, it's just been killer. They have a league most 3 red zone giveaways this season, and 7 of their 11 giveaways as a team have taken place in opponent territory. Once again, you mentioned it. This is the primary reason these guys are 1-3 because they're very talented.
And they've got other guys other than Justin Jefferson, right, that the Chiefs defense has to account for. And I know we'll get to that in a second. But if you think it's just Jefferson, you're wrong. The Chiefs they've got a full thumb drive of stuff they've got to deal with today with these guys.
Well, let's talk about it. I mean, they have playmakers everywhere outside of Jefferson on this offense. What are some defensive keys for the Chiefs here today to make sure their offense can't get going?
Well, honestly, it's very similar to what the Vikings will do. Although the Chiefs don't blitz as much as the Vikings, the Chiefs are the 5th most blitzing team in the league. It's just where those
Spags.
That's Spags. Where they coming from, and the different personnel to try to confuse Kirk Cousins. Now, Jefferson will get his. If he gets $150 and 2 touchdowns, that's just kind of what he does. To me, a gigantic key is T.J. Hawkinson, who grew up as a Chiefs fan. His dad worked for Hy-Vee in Sheraton, Iowa, and would come to Chiefs games as a kid. Well, now he's a Viking tight end. Remember, he was a Lions tight end, and the Lions traded him to the Vikings in the division. Weird. But as soon as he got here, Cousins started to target him between 9 and 10 times a game. That's continued this year. He's had 31 targets in 4 games. So you cannot let T.J. Hawkinson have a huge day. If you do, there's almost too much to deal with here with this Viking offense. K.J. Osborne, Jordan Addison.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of weapons on this team for Minnesota.
This team is so much better than their record indicates. Their offense is a big reason why. And for more on this offense, I caught up with Alec Lewis from The Athletic earlier this week. All right, we're joined now by Alec Lewis. He covers the Vikings for The Athletic. If you recognize Alec's name, he used to cover the Royals for The Athletic, but now he's up in Minnesota doing his thing. And Alec, I want to ask you about this Vikings offense because they're a really interesting study. They have good players and they have good stats this year. Kirk Cousins is having a nice season statistically. Justin Jefferson is, of course, on this team. But yet we haven't really seen the production in terms of scoring points as much this season. How would you evaluate the Vikings offense overall this year so far?
Yeah, they've been kind of an enigma. I mean, you mentioned Justin Jefferson and Kirk Cousins, some of the metrics. I mean, they have been one of the most explosive offenses in the league, kind of right behind Miami if you look at some of the metrics. But their 3-and-out frequency, and then just the turnover. They turned the ball over 7 times in opponent territory, I think 6 times within the 31-yard line. And there's really not a theme between among those turnovers. It's just been really hard to evaluate. I will say, watching them on a down-to-down basis, there is a potential that if they can string it together and eliminate the turnovers and eliminate some of the 3-and-outs, that this offense is talked about among the elite in the NFL. And I think when you have Justin Jefferson, that's just going to be the case regardless.
Well, Justin Jefferson, of course, is one of the best receivers, if not the best receiver in the NFL. There are a lot of weapons on this Vikings offense, though. Who is a player that maybe Chiefs fans might not know that could make an impact on Sunday?
Yeah, I mean, they recently acquired Cam Akers at running back from the Los Angeles Rams, and Cam is a guy who has been recovering from an Achilles injury. It didn't really go well toward the end in Los Angeles, but they introduced him to the team and the offense on the field this past week, and he looked really good running the football. And I think this Vikings offense and Kevin O'Connell, the head coach, have prioritized running the football to open things up in coverage down the field. And so he's the guy I would mention. Rookie Jordan Addison has really entered the mix and looked really solid. They've used him a lot in tandem with Justin Jefferson to spring him open for 2 really long touchdowns the first 2 weeks. So those 2 names would be something to look for, but they extended TJ Hawkinson with a gigantic deal. So there are a ton of weapons on this offense that really make it what it can be at its fullest. And Kevin O'Connell, the Vikings head coach, has been really outspoken that he is hopeful that this is the weekend they can kind of put it all together.
Well, you mentioned how explosive these guys can be and that they have moved the football, but you're right, the giveaways, particularly in the red zone, have just been killer. I think they have 3 red zone giveaways this season already, and there's been 4 times in the red zone this year where they haven't scored any points because they've either turned the ball over or turned it over on downs. It's difficult to win when you're doing that. When you're thinking about the Chiefs' defense, which has been so good this season so far, going into this game, what are some keys, do you think, to make sure that the Vikings offense can't get going here in Week 5 against Kansas City?
Yeah, well, it has to start with Chris Jones. I've heard some good things about this guy as a player, and the Vikings offensive line on its interior is probably the weak point of this Vikings offense. I mean, center Garrett Bradbury has been out since week 1 when he only played 7 snaps due to a back injury. He's trended well. He could return this week. And then the guards, Ezra Cleveland and Ed Ingram, are both they've progressed, they've developed, but again, that is the weak point of the team. So for the Chiefs defense to be able to stifle this Vikings offense, I think it starts there with Chris Jones. And then I think it's limiting the explosive plays of guys like Justin Jefferson and TJ Hawkinson. And if you can affect the offensive line and maybe quiet the run game and then limit those explosive plays, I think the Chiefs are going to be in pretty good shape. But it could be a high scoring affair. I don't know what the points, what people expect for this game, but it really could be kind of a fireworks show for Tony Romo to go crazy about. So it should be pretty fun on Sunday.
Well, I don't think there's any doubt that the Vikings are better than their record says at 1-3. They have really good players. They have a good offense when they're not turning the ball over. Fortunately for the Chiefs, this defense, as I mentioned earlier, has been outstanding through 4 games this season. Hopefully they can keep it rolling here against Kirk Cousins and the Vikings. Alec, great stuff, man. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate you having me.
All right, great stuff there from Alec Lewis. We'll get the inactives here any moment now. First of all, though, Mitch, the guys are in the white-on-whites here today. I just realized that. We always play well in white-on-white, right?
It might be because of Super Bowl IV. Remember, these were the 2 combatants.
Uh-huh.
And if the Chiefs run 65 toss power trap on the first play, you'll know. But wearing the white-on-whites is a throwback to Lenny and Otis Taylor and the guys that won that great Super Bowl in New Orleans, Louisiana.
I love it. Now, before we get the inactives, it is currently Pro Shop discount code time, Mitch. A big deal.
Oh, they were red. They were red tops. Sorry.
Okay.
I screwed that up. They were red tops, white bottoms. Save it on Twitter. Just save it.
But still, the white on white.
Yeah, the white on white's too good. It's Super Bowl I or Super Bowl I against the Packers. That's what I'm thinking of.
I love it.
Save Twitter.
So our discount code this week at the Pro Shop at GEHA Field at Arrowhead Stadium. Once again, it's footballin' on a budget. Footballin' on a budget. If you say that at checkout at the Pro Shop, you're going to get 10% off your order, okay? footballing on a budget. Now, there are some rules around this, as always. The offer is not valid on game day or the day before. It cannot be stacked with other discounts. It's in-store only. It's got to be at the Pro Shop at GEHA Field at Arrowhead. Unfortunately, it does not work online, and it excludes memorabilia, Oakleys, Ray-Bans, and sale items. But all the stuff you see us wearing on Field Pass or Defending the Kingdom, any stuff during the week, all fair game. Footballing on a budget. What do you think?
And don't be disappointed when you heard Oakleys. You went, oh, God. Okay, there's awesome stuff right now in the Pro Shop. You can check it out. And yes, I just want to clarify, the Chiefs wore red in Super Bowl 4, but in Super Bowl 1, they were in all whites.
It's going to eat you up on the flight home.
Oh, it'll kill me. I just want to win. It'll soothe the pain.
There we go. So we'll get the inactives here, hopefully any moment. Just waiting on those. The 3 names we're watching here today, 3 players were listed as questionable coming in. Linebacker Nick Bolton, of course, with that ankle injury. He's questionable coming in. Nick returned to practice this week, which was a good sign after missing the last 2 weeks. We'll see if he can go here in a moment. We're also waiting on Wanye Morris, of course, rookie offensive lineman. He has a hip injury. He is questionable. And defensive tackle Matt Dickerson with a knee injury. He is questionable. We did just get the Vikings inactives. They just tweeted them. And the main guy we were watching was for outside linebacker Marcus Davenport. He is active here today. Davenport has an ankle injury that he's kind of been dealing with all season. He was questionable coming in, but he's going to go here today. That's a big deal.
And Nick is inactive. I just got him.
There it is.
We saw Nick just walk by us. I knew it would go right down to the wire, and we saw him walk by. But with the short week, there's just a lot going into this.
Yeah.
He's practicing this week. He practiced this week, but going to have to go with Drew Tranquil here again, and with the 5 linebackers that are up. So, yeah, that's a rough one.
Looks like Wanye Morris is active here today, so that's good. Matt Dickerson inactive here today, but Nick Bolton is the big one. He's making progress, which is the important thing. Returning to practice this week and it truly being a game-time decision here today is good news moving forward. One
of the things, though, that I think the Chiefs Kingdom knows this now, 11 years into the Andy Reid era, that includes Rick Burkhalter, right, as the head athletic trainer. They will, if they err, it's on the side of precaution.
Yeah.
You and I have seen this now for over a decade. I've never seen them rush a player back too soon. Never. And if you can think of one, let me know. They are always looking out for the player. Sometimes you have to save a player from himself. Nick wants to go. He wanted to, they had to fight him. He had to go back on the field crazy, against Jacksonville. But again, the short week comes into play too. If he's ready to go Thursday night, win this game, get him ready for Thursday.
And before we go, I want to circle back on Davenport because that's a big deal. He's active here for the Vikings. Also, center Garrett Bradbury is active here today. Not a surprise. We thought he would be, but he's their starting center. He's missed the last 3 weeks with a back injury. We'll see how effective he can be here today.
Yeah, and the defensive coaches for the Chiefs this week talked with me about it. That's a big deal for him. This has got getting Creed Humphrey back.
Yeah.
And they've not had him for 3 weeks. He's not only a good physical player, but he's a line caller, right? So just like the Chiefs have to be good today at calling out the line calls against the Vikings, sophisticated blitz scheme, the Vikings have to do the same with us. And so Bradbury coming back brings a big-time veteran back right in front of Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, they're pretty healthy overall, and I'll stress this once again. The Vikings are better than their record indicates.
Yes,
this
sir.
is a team that won 13 games last season. It won't be easy for the Chiefs here today, but if they can get the win, I think it'll really set the tone for the next 3 weeks where we're going to see 3 divisional opponents in the next 17 days. For Mitch Holthus, I'm Matt McMullen. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. Let's go get a victory.